Welcome, everyone, and I appreciate you joining us all here today to talk about the seasonal shift and how to navigate it. What we're really going to talk about is just some kind of think pieces, some strategies around payroll, PTO policies, and compliance, and how that fits into building out a better space for your employees and for your administrators. So first, let's get to some introductions. I am Michael Halford. I'm an account manager on the payroll side here. I've been an expert in this space for about 4 years. And before that, I did a lot with retail store management. I used to manage a couple of different locations for AT&T. So one of my fortes with that is employee management, development, and retention.
Yes, I am Jerica Holton. I am the product marketing manager here at Green Shades. I focus mainly on payroll, but of course, I have a knowledge in the HR space as well as your forms and payroll tax returns. Like Michael, I have a background in retail store management, managing food chains over here on the East Coast, and a little bit of HCM training. So, rolling out some payroll and HR software to those retail locations. And just a fun fact about me, if you are a dog lover, you may know what a Shiba Inu is, but I own a Shiba Inu named Fuji.
Oh, I didn't see you throw that one in there. Man, I have a dog also. She's a pit boxer mix. Her name is Ellie. She's a sweetheart.
Oh yeah, Ellie deserves a shout out as well.
Yeah, can't let her go now. You started it. All right, so today's agenda, we have a short 30-minute session for you all today. So hopefully you get some good knowledge out of this. We're going to talk about effective PTO policy development and integration, payroll adjustments for seasonal dynamics, ensuring compliance during high vacation periods like the summertime season, which is typically the busiest. And then after that, we'll kind of wrap things up, we'll ask a couple of questions and make sure that we drove the points home that we are hoping make the most sense. So let's go ahead and move on into PTO policy development. Really what we're going to be talking about here is understanding PTO and integrating these policies into payroll, talking about what types of policies are out there now, the most common things, and how to use your payroll data to help drive that and make a better experience for your employees. There have been a couple of surveys that have gone out from Forbes, just taking some data in about employees and what they do with their PTO. One of the first things that came to mind is that 4 out of 10 employees do not utilize all of their paid time off in a given year. So they get their allotment, whether it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, however they get that, or whatever they accrue, and they don't take that. And a big factor into that a lot of the time is that we see that employees are feeling a sense of guilt when it comes to utilizing all their time off. Or, many also report, even though they're taking time off, they're doing work while they're on vacation. So really seeing a higher number of unused PTO among those who have an unlimited PTO policy as well, which is becoming more common, especially in the remote workspace. And really, it's critical that employees understand their organization's PTO policies so that they can not feel this sense of guilt and be able to utilize their time, recharge, and make sure they don't experience burnout. Very important. The next part here, 51% of Americans say they will travel in July, making it the most popular month for employees to take time off. I know I have a little bit of time scheduled in July. It's a great time to do it around the 4th of July, great holiday. The weather's hot. You want to get out, go to the beach, go to the pool, whatever. So that's a pretty big trend. Summertime presents the best time to take vacations. Many travel to the beach or other warm locations, embracing the warm weather. So being able to manage your workforce, make sure that you have coverage and availability while people are taking vacation during these busy seasons is really imperative. And having tools to help you do that is really important. The last one, 31% of employees report mandatory paid time off as a top benefit to offer. I know when I've looked at jobs, aside from benefits, for me, one of the most important things to look for is the PTO policy to make sure I have the ability to take my time off and travel and do the things that I like to do in order to recharge and be ready and focused for my work. I'm sure a lot of people would agree with me. So, mandatory PTO means that workers are required to take a certain amount of time off. While the amount of time is up to the employer, it might be a single week, 5 sporadic days, or 1 day per month. But being able to have that mandatory time off where you make sure that your employees do take that time and are able to get refreshed and refocused is really important, not just for their productivity, but for their peace of mind. And it just helps build a better workplace culture.
Michael, I love that first stat, and I just want to add to that really quick because you do see when you have unlimited PTO that a lot of people feel more hesitant to take time off. And I don't know if it's because I know I've dealt with both situations, unlimited PTO and having structured PTO with maybe 2 or 3 weeks off. And when you feel like you're going to lose the time, you almost feel like a pressure to take it. And I guess with unlimited, you don't want to feel like you're abusing the policy. And that's what I read a lot is people feel like they're abusing the policy. They take too much time off. And there's also not that pressure of, oh, I'm going to lose this. I'm going to lose this time that I worked for. So then you see people not take as much time off.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good point. And that sense of guilt that employees feel when they have that unlimited and they don't want to take too much time. I mean, it's good that they think that way, but at the same time, that's the responsibility of their management and their supervisors to make that call. So it's up to them. They should request their time if they need it. And then if the manager denies it, then they can give a good reason why. And then that way they don't have that sense of guilt. So I think that's something that there's a little bit of a drop in communication sometimes in some organizations that way where the employees don't expect that or they're trying to do the manager's job by singling themselves out and saying, I don't need to take time. And I think that's kind of the same thing when it comes to that mandatory time as well. You know, people have that sense of guilt where they think, I don't need to take time off. I need to get work. We don't have the coverage. We don't have the scheduling, those kind of things. That's not their job to determine. So I just think that's something that needs to be communicated better to the employees.
I definitely agree.
Well, some good stuff there. Let's talk about the importance of clear and effective PTO policies. They're not only crucial for compliance, and that's really what's going to be important for the administrative side, but for the majority of the workforce, what it's really going to be about is fostering a positive work environment and that workplace culture that I mentioned in the previous slide. You want to be able to attract and retain good talent. And that's one of the ways that you're going to be able to do it is by offering good employee benefits, not just for their health and medical benefits, but benefits for their well-being, being able to have that work-life balance, which is so important. And I think that's really come to the forefront in the last few years, especially when we saw a little bit of shift in the workplace when it came to what happened with COVID-19 and quarantine and working remotely and those kind of things. You see that work-life balance come a little bit more to the forefront. And having those communicated PTO policies, which are communicated clearly, can help you stand out from the competition during recruitment. Also can give you a competitive advantage over other companies if you're really stating great policies that are there for the employees to see right before they even get hired. Then we're talking about boosting productivity and reducing that burnout, which I mentioned a lot in the last slide as well. If you have clear PTO policies that encourage your employees to take time off, they feel valued, which is going to reduce that burnout. And they're going to be able to take the time off when they need it in order to recharge so they can get refreshed and come back and do their best work. I think that's pretty clear. And employees can recognize that when they see those kind of things, it makes them want to work harder when they get back as well, because they know that they have the ability to take that time for themselves. Then we talk about ensuring compliance. So what that really means is adherence to the specific laws that are there, but also fair implementation. So, there are definitely clear PTO policies and different laws for federal, state, and, whatever type of level you're talking about. And making sure that you have policies that comply with those laws, of course, it's going to minimize any type of legal risk you might have there. But fair implementation as well is talking about having transparent policies that you can make sure all employees are feeling that they're treated equal and reducing any potential disputes that way as well. So it's going to make sure that you kind of dodge any of those type of issues. And then the last one here is what I've been talking about is fostering a positive workplace culture. Making sure that your employees feel valued, they feel that they're in a competitive workspace, they feel that they're on the cutting edge of companies where they're going to get the right types of policies in place to give them their time off and make sure that they have that proper balance and can feel like they don't need to go somewhere else to find it. I think that's really important for retaining that talent like we talked about earlier. Some tips and tricks for managing your PTO policies. Really talking about ensuring a smooth process for both the employees and the admins. So being able to clearly communicate those policies is going to be one of the top things there. So during recruitment and onboarding, it's critical to communicate those policies. You can add it to job listings. You can add it during your onboarding workflow if you're offering that online for your new hires. And you can consider, if you're doing that, collecting like e-signatures to make sure that you're ensuring that your employees understand those policies. And then when you're talking about defining the PTO types, a lot of companies have different buckets for different types of PTO time. Vacation, sick leave could be separate. You could just have overall PTO where it's one bucket if you're offering unlimited. Personal days or something else there. We see things like holidays, floating holidays, those kind of things. Those can all be included in different buckets so that you can make sure that you're managing those in different properties and that your employees are accruing that time properly. Transparent accrual rates and carryover rules. So making sure that your employees are understanding how they're gaining that time. If they're doing it on a per paycheck basis, if they get all their time at the beginning of the year, understanding how they get it and when it's available to them. And then also carryover rules for the employees who don't use all of their accrued time in a given calendar year. What happens to it? Do they have options? Can they cash it out? Can they roll it over to the next year, or do they just forfeit it? They lose it. So making sure employees clearly understand that so they're not shocked or surprised and they know what to do with their time. Structured employee requests and managerial approval access. So having the ability for the employees to go into their employee self-service portal, sign in online and be able to see their time off, what they have on their balances, request time off, and then having that routed over to their manager or supervisor or admin for approval. And then maybe setting something like a clear expected deadline for when that approval should happen so that the employee isn't curious and doesn't think that they're not being heard. And then, of course, regular policy reviews. Never hurts to refresh employees' memory of their PTO and what they have. Encourage them to take time off, review their balances, review the company policies, and communicate any changes to that policy immediately. That way they feel like they know what they're dealing with.
So now I'm going to cover some good strategies for handling those increase in vacation requests. As we kind of talked about earlier, summer, especially July, is a really popular time for people to take time off. And the way I always kind of bucket it, especially with this first tip with planning ahead with your own vacation calendar, is I always bucket into almost like the busy seasons, right? So we have the summer season, and then we have that nice stretch of holidays that we all know, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, at November through January timeframe. So something I used to love to do back when I was in retail is we would have a paper calendar and we would write down, hey, here's everybody's names, pick the days that you want off, and we would discuss it as a team. As a group of managers, there was 5 or 6 of us. We would discuss, hey, I want Christmas, I want Thanksgiving, and kind of balance it out and have the conversation amongst each other. So we can write it out and request that time off so we can make sure that everybody has their time off. We already planned ahead. We're not taking in last minute requests. And I know it can be harder with larger teams. So that's when it comes into prioritizing those requests fairly, right? So maybe you do it on a first come, first serve basis. So consider the approving requests based off of submission dates. Maybe do it based off of seniority or role base. So factor in the employee seniority or the critical roles that you need during that season. Maybe you're not able to give certain positions off during the summertime, but you are able to during that holiday season, or vice versa. Also consider maybe the early requests, again, the first come, first serve. Motivate your employees to put in those requests early. Maybe you create a fillable document in your HR portal that you send out to employees to add their name to. You give them a deadline to submit those documents back to you. And then next, ensuring adequate coverage. Again, it really helps when you plan ahead and you go ahead and get in these requests. And honestly, this is a great time to consider cross training, to be able to fill the gaps with employees from other departments. Again, leaning back into kind of my retail experience, I know I had employees who were stockers who have a little experience on a register, and during the seasons where maybe my cashiers went off, I'm able to kind of fill in those gaps. And the great thing about time and attendance technology, I know for us, we didn't want those hours charged to grocery if they're going to be on the front end. So we're able to tag those hours to different departments. So you can also still manage it on that side, but a great opportunity to think about cross training and just making sure that you have coverage. You're not accepting too many requests on one day, looking at those calendars and making sure that you have enough employees to work. And maybe that's also looking at some of your historical payroll data, looking at how much sales you do during that type of the year, and just making sure that you can plan efficiently. And then using technology to make this process efficient, right? So allowing employees to submit those requests gives them a lot of freedom to put them in early and at their own time and convenience. And then for managers, making the process simple to just go in, review all your requests in one location. And maybe you're using limited admins to where certain requests go to certain managers just to help streamline the process. So now we're going to talk a little bit about integrating those PTO policies into your payroll. So first, I want to talk about unlimited payroll coverage. This is a very important thing, especially when it comes to time off policies. There's solutions such as I know GP payroll may limit the number of PTO codes that you can put in. So it's nice to have that flexibility to be able to put in those unlimited codes to account for your organization's unique policy. So going in to set those up on the back end will help you tremendously during your payroll process. And Michael kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but considering your accrual, so maybe it's from the first hire date, maybe they accrue it annually per shift. Depending on your company and how you want to accrue that payroll, making sure you set that into the time code so it will reflect in your payroll operations. You'll collect that accrual as employees work their shifts and it's reflected over into their payroll data. And then lastly, that considering your time off tiering. So what that is that it is time off tiering is a system that adjusts PTO accrual rates, maximum balances, and rollover amounts based on the length of employee service. So basically, if an employee maybe worked for 5 years, they may accrue more PTO than somebody who has only worked 3 years. And so you want to make sure that you're accruing that PTO based off of how long they've been there. We see this a lot in companies who's trying to foster a lot of care for their employees, especially ones that have been around for a long time. Since we don't see that longevity of retainment anymore, this is also a great value prop for retaining your workforce.
All right, thanks, Jerica. So getting into payroll adjustments, seasonal dynamics, and how to prepare your payroll for the busy season. So if you're a business who has, a switch as far as in the busy seasons of how many employees you have, such as Parks Marina, which is a client of ours, this is how some of the ways that we can help with that. So Parks Marina, they started off as a small location and then grew into 3 separate locations, I believe, and noticed a big swing in their increase in seasonal workers during this time being on the water, during the summer months, and really needed to have a payroll and HR solution that could be really tailored to meet the expanding needs of their business. They actually have, a payroll person who was starting to get overwhelmed and needed to have assistance and some additional help in order to manage all the different seasonal work during that time. So in their quest for a more streamlined operation, they chose us, GreenShades Payroll and HR solution, that gives comprehensive in-house payroll processing, as well as, a full HR suite and the ability to manage PTO and time. And we're able to get that implemented before the summer rush, so they allowed them to fully leverage the system's capabilities during the peak season. Their payroll administrator now, after they've gotten used to and going with GreenShades, has been able to effectively oversee the process independently and now no longer requires additional staff. So what that did is actually save the company about $50,000 is what the salary of that additional staff member would be. So really, not only did it increase their efficiency, it increased their overhead as well. The advantage of in-house payroll. Let's talk a little bit about this. So in-house payroll over your outsourced options, such as like ADP, where they manage all of the data for you and do a lot of the processing for you, gives you a lot more flexibility and control over your data and how you're processing payroll, how you're processing PTO requests, and when you do all of these things. Seasonal workforce kind of demands a solution that's flexible to keep up with changes. So with an in-house solution like GreenShades, you have the flexibility to run as many pay runs as you need in any given week, any given time frame, any given month. Support multiple pay schedules, run any off-cycle checks for any terminations of like short-term employees or anything like that. So any other circumstances that you can think of, you have that flexibility and control. You can create unlimited payroll codes like Jerica was just displaying to address pay situations unique to the busy season, as well as any custom fields to tie into the increased labor to the right location, project, any type of thing like that. And then you can have instant access and control over the company data, all the employee information, and then all the business data as well. We did have a situation that we saw before in the industry that a payroll provider that lost the employee information. And with GreenShades, you can easily retain and rehire employees into the system, so you don't have to worry about that.
Thank you, Michael. So next, we're going to talk about some tools for adjusting for the seasonal workforce. So first, we're going to start with thinking about seasonal worker earning codes. So when it comes to the seasonal workforce, you may have varying rates for these workers. So maybe they're getting paid a special salary for their seasonal work, or maybe if they're working overtime during the summertime, for that overtime, you're paying them shift differentials, or maybe they're working on a 4th of July or Memorial Day, you're offering some type of shift differential. You want to go ahead and have those earning codes set up in the back end because it helps tremendously during your payroll processing to go ahead and have those earning codes set up. And as we talked about before, you do have unlimited earning codes, so you're able to set up as many as you need. So next, providing self-service tools, allowing your employees to have that access. By law, they have to have access to their pay stubs. So giving them access to self-service tools, allowing them to clock in and out from their devices, things like that can help when they're working across various locations or you have a heavy influx in your workforce. It can help delegate some of those responsibilities. So you're not having to manage 20 new employees during this busy season. Then next, be prepared for offboarding. As we talked about with the in-house flexibility, you can issue that termination pay with ease, all cycle paychecks. So if you do need to pay out some PTO balances, you can go ahead and issue an extra paycheck if it's not in their normal pay stub. And then just making sure they have access to their year-end forms once that season comes around. And then next, precise timekeeping. So utilizing your timekeeping technology to not only review timesheets as you have those additional timesheets coming in from your seasonal workforce, but also managing those increasing PTO requests. As we talked about before, having a streamlined approval process is key in managing this workforce. And then next, you want to be able to manage those schedules during the busy seasons. So working with providers such as Salex are great scheduling solutions that allows your employees to swap shifts. So they are needing some last minute changes or last minute times off. They can post their shifts and employees can see available shifts to pick up those shifts. They can allow that PTO to reflect in the schedule so you can schedule around it. You can uphold compliance for complex work shifts. So this may include things such as minors, break rules, overtime rules. And then you can also identify departments and locations employees are working with. So when it comes to payroll processing, you can automatically pull that information in for compliance needs.
Yeah, I agree with you. Salex is a great time partner for us that allows us to work with some of that scheduling that's more complex.
Yes, a great partner for complex scheduling needs. If you have those varying schedules and seasonal workforce changes, they're a great partner to consider. And lastly, we're going to talk about ensuring compliance. So we pulled these out as some of the main payroll concerns and payroll errors that we see across the industries. So one of them is employee classification. So when you're bringing in those seasonal workers, making sure you classify them correctly. Are they a full-time employee or are they a contract employee? If they're full-time, making sure you're collecting those W-4 so you know what taxes to withhold. Then as people are working these additional shifts, it could cause a lot more overtime, or maybe you're in an industry that requires tipping. If employees aren't collecting enough tips, you want to make sure that you're adhering to minimum wage guidelines. So as your workforce becomes more dynamic, you're not jeopardizing compliance in the meantime. And then lastly, be prepared for your informed season. With all these temporary workers coming in, you need a way to make sure that they have access to their year-end forms. You're distributing W-2s and 1099s based off of that classification. And then lastly, PTO is not federally mandated, but it does vary state by state. So for example, we have FMLA. So if you have employees that have been working for a while for your company, they're entitled to certain laws if they have gave birth to a child, have sick family members to care for. And then paid sick leave and jury duty also vary state by state. So for example, Alabama grants full-time employees jury duty leave at the regular rate and is mandated by the state. So you want to pay attention to what laws are for your state. And then lastly, laws for paying out your PTO. Some states consider PTO as earnings, wages owed to the employee. So you want to check to make sure your state doesn't require you to pay that out. A few states include California, Colorado, and DC. And so you just want to pay attention to those laws as they vary state by state. So to wrap up, you want to make sure that you implement your PTO policy and communicate it clearly to your employees, your new hires. You want to prepare your payroll for the busy season. So go ahead and set up those codes in the back end. Consider software to help manage schedules and everything. And then lastly, you want to maintain compliance. So as you're going through this busy season, don't jeopardize your compliance in the process. And lastly, Green Shades, we offer payroll, human resources, benefits administration, tax and compliance, and time and labor management. If you guys have anything for us, please feel free to reach out to the Green Shades team. We'll be able to assist you any further.
Thank you again, and I hope you all have a very, very fantastic day. Take care.